Hello students, here I am with the fourth part of climate. We'll be winding up the chapter today. We'll be dealing with certain very interesting chapters. Try to recall, we have done 4 seasons of India. Hot weather season, cold weather season, advancing monsoon season and retreating monsoon season. And all the seasons, they do receive rainfall in some part or the other part of the country. So, we shall discuss the distribution of rainfall and on the basis of Köppen's classification, we will discuss the climatic regions of India and the variability in rainfall. And of course, not to forget the global warming, because global warming is also a part of climate. So, when we know that India experiences variation in rainfall, let us see how can we relate all the chapters together. If you know that Himalayas, they protect the subcontinent from the extremely cold winds coming from the central India. It enables the northern India to have uniformly very high temperature in comparison to the other latitudes. Similarly, the peninsular plateau under the influence of the sea shares equable climate and there are variations in the climatic conditions. Nevertheless, monsoons, they act as the unifying bond for the whole country. So, the unifying influence of the monsoon on the Indian subcontinent is quite perceptible. The seasonal alteration of the wind system and the associated weather conditions, they also provide a rhythmic cycle of season. Rhythmic means from cold weather, we move on to the hot weather. The hot weather, the low pressure will attract the reversal of trade winds. There we have advancing. The advancing monsoon season will attract the retreating monsoon. And as the monsoons leave the country, we have the cold weather season again. So, one season follows the another. The Indian landscape, the whole country, our animal life, our plant life, the whole of the agricultural community depends on the monsoons, our festivals, everything revolves around this phenomena of rainfall. Year after year, people of India, from north to south, from east to west, we eagerly wait for the arrival of rainfall in our country. And of course, these monsoons, they bind the whole of the country by providing water and agricultural activities in moment. Now, when we talk about monsoons and the economic life, of course they are related. Why not? Because monsoon is that axis around which revolves the entire agricultural cycle of India. Not each and every part of the country has proper irrigation facilities. So, more than 64% of the people, they are dependent on agriculture and of course on the monsoons for irrigation. We have variety of crops starting from tropical, subtropical, temperate and all of them they are associated with monsoons. Except the Himalayan region, all the country they have temperature above the threshold level to grow the crops. So, we depend on the monsoons. Regional variations are of course there and that too helps in the growing of various types of crops. We talk about variability of rainfall. Now, children, try to recall what all you have done in the practical book of India. We have tried to find out mean, median, mode, standard deviation and coefficient of variation. So, we try to calculate the variability of rainfall. Certain places, rainfall brings droughts. Certain places, it brings floods. So, it is related. Agricultural prosperity also depends on the monsoons and not monsoons only. Adequate distribution of the rainfall. If the rainfall fails, agriculture is adversely affected. If we have more rainfall, again the crops they suffer. Sudden monsoon burst creates problems for soil erosion also. Winter rainfall by the temperate cyclones in northern India is highly beneficial for the rabi crops. The regional climatic variations are there. So, everything you can identify in the variety of food you eat, in the types of the clothes you wear and the types of houses we have, isn't it? Now, Indian rainfall can be measured in two patterns. Number one, seasonal rainfall. The seasonal rainfall is received by the southwest monsoons within 3 to 4 months. Whereas when we calculate the annual average rainfall, that is throughout the year. So, the average annual rainfall in India is about 125 centimeters only, but it has great spatial variations. That means the rainfall, the amount, the intensity varies from place to place, whereas snowfall is restricted only to the Himalayan region. Do you know which are the areas of very high rainfall? Now we shall discuss the areas of very high rainfall. The highest rainfall occurs along the west coast on the Western Ghat, as well as in the sub-Himalayan areas of northeast and the hills of Meghalaya. Here the rainfall is more than 200 centimeters. In some parts of Khasi Hills, Jaintia Hills, the rainfall exceeds 1000 centimeters. In the Brahmaputra Valley and the adjoining hilly areas, the rainfall is less than 200 centimeters. In the Brahmaputra Valley and the adjoining areas, the rainfall is less than 200 centimeters. Children, what can be the reason? The topography, of course. The areas of medium rainfall. The rainfall between 100 to 200 centimeters is received in the southern parts of Gujarat, eastern Tamil Nadu, northeastern peninsula covering Odisha, Jharkhand, Bihar, eastern Madhya Pradesh, northern Ganga plain, along the sub-Himalayan and the Kachar valley of Manipur. So, these are the regions of medium rainfall, which is between 100 to 200 centimeters. Now, there are certain regions which receive very low rainfall. Western Uttar Pradesh, Delhi, Haryana, Punjab, Jammu and Kashmir, eastern Rajasthan, Gujarat and Deccan Plateau. They receive rainfall between 50 to 100 centimeters only. And many of these states, they receive rainfall by the mingling of Arabian Sea branch and Bay of Bengal branch. Now, there are certain regions which do not receive adequate rainfall. Parts of the peninsula, especially in Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, Maharashtra, Ladakh and most parts of the western Rajasthan, they receive rainfall below 50 centimeters. So, when we talk about variability of rainfall, because of its uneven nature, we try to calculate with the help of coefficient of variation, where CV, that is coefficient of variation, is equal to standard deviation upon mean into 100. So, these values of coefficient of variation show the change. Now, when we try to calculate the variability of rainfall, the values of coefficient of variation show variability of rainfall in India. The values show the change from the mean values of the rainfall. The actual rainfall in some places deviates from 20 to 50%, whereas a variability of less than 25% exists on the western coast, western Ghats, northeastern peninsula, eastern plains of Ganga, northeastern India, Uttaranchal and Himachal Pradesh. Children, do you understand what is the variability of rainfall? Even if the rainfall is received in that region, the variability, the intensity varies. These areas have an annual rainfall of over 100 centimeters, but the variability of over 50% exists in the western part of Rajasthan, northern part of Jammu and Kashmir and interior parts of the Deccan Plateau. These areas have an annual rainfall of less than 50 centimeters. Rest of India, it has a variability of 25 to 50% and these areas receive an annual rainfall between 50 to 100 centimeters. So, the annual average rainfall keeping on one side and to calculate the variability of rainfall on the other side, this is done by the coefficient of variation. Now children, if you talk to your parents, especially the grandparents, you will try to know about the traditional Indian seasons. Have you heard of Sawan Mas, Magh Mas, when your grandparents tell you, now we will have fast blowing winds, this month will be very chilly. So, in the Indian tradition, a year is divided into 6 2-monthly seasons. This cycle of season, which the common people in the north and the central India follow, is based on their practical experience and age-old perception of weather phenomena. So, this system does not match the seasons in South India, where there is very little variation in the seasons. Now, let's talk about the Indian seasons and the months associated according to the Indian calendar. Vasant Ritu, which takes place in the months of March and April, is known as Chaitra and Vaishakh. Grishma Ritu takes place in the month of May and June, known as Jesht Mas and Ashadh Mas. Varsha Ritu in the month of July and August, known as Sawan and Bhadra. Sharad Ritu happens to take place in the months of September and October, also known as Ashwin Mas and Kartik Mas. Hemant Ritu is in the month of November and December, known as Margshish and Posh Mas. Shishir Ritu is the cold month which happens in January and February, also known as Magh and Falgun. So, try to talk about these months. Your grandparents would be too happy to know that yes, you know about the Indian seasons also. Now, we move on to the Köppen scheme. The climatic regions according to Köppens. The main criteria of dividing the whole of the country into climatic region was based on rainfall and temperature. This classification is the most widely used classification of climate. In the empirical climate, the classification scheme was developed by Köppen. He identified a close relationship between the distribution of vegetation and climate, and he selected certain values of temperature and precipitation and related them to the distribution of vegetation. So, in this empirical classification, which is based on the mean annual rainfall and mean annual temperature, we divide the whole of the country into various categories. The whole of the India has a monsoon type of climate, but the combination of elements, if we talk about the combination of elements of weather, it reveals many regional variations. These variations represent the subtype of the monsoon climate. It is the basis of the climatic regions. So, a climatic region, as by Köppen, has an homogeneous climatic condition, which is the result of combination of factors, temperature and rainfall, keeping in mind as the main two important elements. Now, according to that, the following, the ones which I am speaking now, are the major climatic types. Tropical climate, the regions where the mean monthly temperature throughout the year is more than 18 degrees Celsius. The region where precipitation is very low in comparison to temperature, so that region is known as dry. That place is known as a dry climate. If dryness is less, it is semi-arid, so we write a small alphabet S. If it is more, the climate is arid and we write small w. The warm temperate climates where the mean temperature of the coldest month is between 18 degrees Celsius and -3 degrees Celsius. The regions where the mean temperature of the warmest month is more than 10 degrees Celsius, that comes under cool temperate climate, and the temperature of the coldest month is -3 degrees Celsius. Then we have ice climates where the mean temperature of the warmest month is less than 10 degrees Celsius. Now, Köppen, he also uses letter symbols to denote the climate types. Try to recognize these climate types given in the table in your NCERT book. Each type is further subdivided into subtypes on the basis of seasonal variations in the distribution pattern of rainfall and temperature. When you go through these climatic types, children, do remember, if we identify one region as arid or semi-arid, that particular region will definitely have more variations, and the reason is the same: location, topography, air pressure, surface winds. So, a small s for semi-arid, W for arid, and we have many small letters to define the subtypes. For example, F for sufficient precipitation, M for the rainforest despite a dry monsoon season. The rainforest should have more than 200 centimeters of rainfall, but a dry monsoon is experienced there. It is written by a small m. W for a dry season in winter. H, dry and hot. C, less than 4 months with mean temperature over 10 degrees Celsius. And a small g, especially for the Gangetic Plains, because the whole of the Gangetic Plains are a plain, vast area experiencing more or less same topography. Now, children, when we talk about temperature, when we talk about rainfall, when we talk about variation in the climate of India, how can we leave global warming? Global warming is a concept which is very close to everybody's heart. There is a change. Change is the law of nature. But that change should be a positive one, not a negative one. Climate also has witnessed change in the past, in the global as well as the local levels. It is changing even now, but the change is imperceptible. A number of geological evidences suggested that once upon a time, the large part of the earth was under the ice cover. It is not so now. So, change is the law of nature. But what are the causes of global warming? Because it is really affecting the human beings. Besides the natural causes, we should be more emphasizing on the human causes, the man-made activities such as large-scale industrialization, presence of polluting gases in the atmosphere. They lead to global warming. Now, we shall discuss about greenhouse effect and global warming also. Due to global warming, the increasing temperatures which are leading to the postponement of seasons, the changing seasons, uneven division of the rainfall. The temperature of the world is significantly increasing. Carbon dioxide produced by the human activities is a major source of concern. The carbon dioxide released to the atmosphere in large quantities by burning of fossil fuels is increasing gradually. Other gases like methane, chlorofluorocarbons and nitrous oxide, which are present in much smaller quantities in the atmosphere, they together with carbon dioxide are known as greenhouse gases. What is greenhouse effect? Now, due to the presence of greenhouse gases, the atmosphere is behaving like a greenhouse. The atmosphere also transmits incoming solar radiation but absorbs vast majority of long wave radiation emitted upwards by the Earth's surface. Try to recall terrestrial radiation, solar radiation we have done in the fundamentals book. So, these are the gases which absorb long wave radiation and are called greenhouse gases. The processes that warm the atmosphere are often collectively referred as greenhouse effect. These gases are better absorbers of long wave radiation than carbon dioxide. That means increased level of carbon dioxide is harmful, whereas increased use of that gases is better for the humanity and for the climate. So, these gases have been contributing to global warming. It is said that due to global warming, the polar ice caps and the mountain glaciers would melt and the amount of water in the oceans would increase. So, children, what will happen to the low-lying areas? They'll get flooded. The mean annual surface temperature of the earth in the past 150 years has really increased. It is projected that by the year 2100, the global temperature will warm about 2 degrees Celsius, which will not be beneficial for the mankind. This rise in temperature will accompany many other changes. One of these is a rise in the sea level, because the glaciers would melt, the ice caps would melt due to the global warming, due to the rising temperature. According to the current prediction, the sea level will rise 48 centimeters by the end of 21st century. This would increase the incidence of annual flooding. All the low-lying areas, islands would be drowned. Now this climatic change will have many adverse effects. Especially, they will promote insect-borne diseases like malaria, and they will lead to shift in climatic boundaries, making certain regions very wetter and the others very dry. The agricultural pattern would shift. Now we are dependent on monsoons, so we have Kharif, Rabi, Zaid season. If the rainfall intensity shifts, we will have to change our agricultural seasons also. The human population as well as the ecosystem would suffer and they would experience change. What would happen to the Indian sea coast if the sea level rises by 50 centimeters above present one? It would be a very bad thing for the Indian subcontinent. What would happen to the Indian sea coast if the sea level rises 50 centimeters above the present one? The low-lying areas would drown, which would not be good for our country, isn't it? So, the best solution to prevent the climate change, to prevent the global warming is afforestation. Children, you must have understood the productive and the protective uses of forests and trees. Let us all become the ambassadors to make our country a beautiful one. Nurture a tree, plant trees, let it grow, and you will be contributing something for your country. Thank you. Jai Hind.